right, good morning. That's our 10 o'clock bell. So we'll go ahead and begin with our Bible class. We're in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Anybody need a book? I've got a couple extras up here. All right. I had a cold last week and thought I was just about over it, and I feel like I'm losing my voice. So, Jeremy, you're on standby for, okay. Just pick up on the questions and continue to read. And then sermon, we'll have Jeff do the sermon if I lose my voice. So, there we go. We're covered right here. Okay. That's what y'all get for sitting close. So, 2 Corinthians chapter 9. I will need some help reading to try to conserve as much of my voice as I can. I believe we're on page 64. Question number 13, I think, is where we're picking up. Bonnie says yes. Question number 13. To kind of refresh us, if somebody would go ahead and read 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 12 through 18. Okay. Yes, 10, 12 through 18. All right, thanks, Jeremy. So what we looked at last time, what we just read again, these last few chapters are going to have a lot of Paul continuing to defend his apostleship, and part of what he's into now is, well, look at the reasons and look at the way in which I or don't really promote myself is kind of what he's at there. And so when we answered question 12 and 11 last time, we said, all right, well, Paul doesn't want to be included with these people that are boasting about themselves, saying, hey, look at what all I do for God. Look at the things that I'm able to accomplish. Look at the missionary journeys I go on. Now, he does talk about those things, but it's not in a manner to which he's building himself up. Now, he does, it seems kind of odd because he says that, and then as we continue on through these last few chapters, he's going to talk a lot about himself. And so it's almost like, wait a second, is he being hypocritical here? Is he saying, look, I don't boast about myself, but look at all the things I do. Look at all the things I've gone through. And it's going to be important to make sure we pay attention to the way he describes these things. He's not saying I'm greater than other apostles, I'm greater than other disciples, other Christians, because I go through these things. But he is defending, look, if I wasn't an apostle, if I wasn't doing these things for the right reasons, why would I put up with all the things that I'm putting up with? So that's kind of a sneak preview into what he's building up to here as he goes through this chapter, this part of his letter. Let's go ahead and answer question 13. Paul did not want to boast in other men's labors. Okay, what does this mean that he doesn't want to boast in other men's labors? Yeah, he doesn't want to go around and say, look, the church is exploding right now, right? The church is spreading like wildfire at this time in history. And there's a lot of great things going on. There's a lot of good men that are standing up for Christ and preaching Christ. There's a lot of apostles out there. It's not all Paul's doing, right? He wants to make sure he's not taking credit for everything, right? It's not really about credit. That's something we also need to realize today, right? It's not about who gets the credit for doing right things, right? We shouldn't be boastful about the things we do today. There's a lot of works of the church that go on that, hey, you might see 2, 3, 4 people out there leading those things, but that doesn't mean that they're not being supported by maybe an entire congregation, right? Or a large group of people. And one of the worst things we can do in those situations is if we're one of those people out in front to say, well, look at the things I've done. Look at how great I am. Look at where I am bringing us. I mean, Paul wants to stay away from that mindset. He doesn't want to take credit for things that other people are doing. And he's not really worried about the credit anyways here. And we're going to see that as we continue on through these additional chapters here at the end. Yeah, a lot of times, right? A lot of times the person that brags the loudest maybe has done the least, right? Because, hey, they're probably not doing it for the right reasons if all they're concerned about is bragging about it, talking about it. Question 14. All the Christians glorying should be what? In the Lord, right? Look, don't be proud, right, of yourself. Now in a prideful way, right? Don't look back. Again, this is the danger here. This is the danger for really anyone that's part of great works of the church at times. Don't look back and say, boy, they sure are lucky to have me, right? It is, boy, we give the glory to the Lord here. Look at what the Lord is allowing us to do. Question number 15. What kind of commendation is not approved of the Lord? Yeah, commendation of yourself. Right along with what we've basically answered with the last 3 questions there, right? That's not approved by the Lord. We shouldn't be commending ourselves. We shouldn't be showing that, hey, I'm the greatest, right? Look at me. All right, thought question. Tell which of the following you think is the hardest to do and be ready to support your selection. So it says, preach the gospel, minister to the needy saints, attend the services of the church, and bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Which one of those? And I don't guess there's a right answer here. But for some of y'all, what of the hardest of that A through D? Which one of those is the hardest for you? Preach the gospel. Why? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Every thought. Whoa. Oh yeah. I'm with you on D. Anybody else have any other input here? What is the hardest, you think? Okay. Why is that? Absolutely. Yeah. It's easy not to think about because we're comfortable, right? It's easy not to even consider what's going on across the world, across the street, right? Because, hey, I'm doing fine, right? Yeah. Anybody else? have a different reason why other than what's already been discussed here. For me, it's D. Bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Every thought. Like Jeremy said, every single thought. Bring it into captivity. Like, take control of it and make sure that thought aligns with what Christ wants you to have thoughts about. That's tough, right? You get cut off in traffic, you got to grab that thought that you have towards that person in front of you, right? Every thought, that goes through everything we do. Part of why it's also the hardest for me, okay, preach the gospel. Can you preach the gospel for the wrong motives if you don't bring every thought into captivity? Absolutely, right? You can preach a spot on, great sermon by the Bible that gets great response, that people change their lives about, and you can be sinning if you don't have every thought into captivity and you're not doing that for the right reasons. You can minister to the needy saints. You can have every single day you can minister to a needy saint, right? But are you ministering with the right mindset? Are you thinking through these things correctly, right? You can attend the services of the church. Hey, that is very hard for some people. It really is. But you can push through your struggles and attend the services of the church. And you can sit through that service thinking about how much trouble it was for you to get there and thinking about everything other than what your thoughts should be focused on. So for me, it's D, because if you don't have D, there's a good chance you're going to mess up on A through C, or at least from time to time mess up. And so that bring every thought into captivity is definitely it's definitely the one that I think is the hardest to do. All right, let's look at these true false. Try to get into chapter 11 here in a minute. All right, question 1. Some of the brethren at Corinth resented Paul. Yeah, I got some head nods. Yes, some resented Paul. We see that in verse 1 and in verse 10, really. There was this accusation of, look, you're a different person. You write these letters and you're so bold and you sound so good and you come off so strong, but when you're in front of us, we don't see it. There was this resentment going on, right? That he tried to clear up here in chapter 10. Question number 2. In this chapter, Paul is praised by the Corinthians for his fair words and good speeches. False. Yeah, now he is told he's bold in his letters, but again, remember we talked about, well, maybe he wasn't even that good at public speaking. Maybe that wasn't his strong suit. Maybe that was part of his thorn in the flesh, or his thorn in the flesh made it harder. And so he wasn't being praised for his public presence, his fair words and good speeches. Question number 3. Paul said that the weapons of the Christians' warfare are not carnal. It's true. They're not carnal. Christians don't. The Christian warfare, the war that we're involved in, which I preached on last Sunday night, that Christian warfare, that's not fought with bombs and guns and swords, right? That's fought with spiritual things. And a big part of that is controlling those thoughts, taking those thoughts into captivity for Christ. All right, question number 4. Paul said that the weapons of the Christian warfare are mighty. True. What did he say they were capable of? Do you remember? It was bringing down strongholds. Remember we talked about that? Hey, the Word of God has the power to bring down a stronghold. It's, something that an arrow or a battering ram or whatever they would have used in warfare there might have stood no chance against. Hey, these Christians' weapons, these spiritual things, can even penetrate through that stronghold. All right, question number 5. It is a mark of wisdom to compare ourselves with other Christians. False, that's right. We shouldn't be comparing ourselves, right? We should compare ourselves to the scriptures, right? See where we need to improve there, see where we're doing the right things there, but not to other Christians, not so that we can boast about being better than others. Question number 6, it was not Paul's desire to boast of things without his measure. True, yeah, that's in verses 13 through 15 that we read not that long ago. Question number 7, Paul wanted to preach the gospel to regions even beyond Corinth. True. Yeah, that was verse 16, to preach the gospel in regions beyond you, and not to boast in every man's line of things made ready at our hand. His desire was to continue moving forward with the gospel, even beyond them. Question number 8. The words spiritual and carnal are close relatives. False. Yeah, they really mean the opposite thing, right? Carnal are physical things that we can touch, that we can feel, that we can see, right? Spiritual things are those things that will last for eternity. They're not bound by, physical laws. They will last for eternity. All right, so that's through chapter 10. We'll go ahead and start in chapter 11. Again, if somebody would help me out by reading here, verses 1 through 12 of chapter 11. If somebody wouldn't mind grabbing that. Thanks, Jeff. So, we'll go ahead. We're going to go ahead and jump into the questions and just try to have discussion from there. I need my voice to hold out for a little longer this morning. So, question number 1. Why did Paul mention Eve in this chapter? What was the point of that? Yeah, to show how Eve was seduced, tempted, right, brought into sin by that serpent. We actually, again, we just recently talked about this in a sermon when we talked about the tactics that Satan uses, right? In this spiritual war that we're in, Satan will use certain tactics, and he doesn't come and just say, look, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to make you miserable. I'm going to make you regret life. I'm going to make you hurt others. I'm going to make you hurt yourself. He doesn't do that. He shows something that looks good, right? He shows something, hey, this might be okay over here, right? And so he doesn't want the church in Corinth to be tempted, corrupted the same way that Eve was, right? By saying, well, did God really say this? Do we really have to follow this part? I mean, did God really mean that when he said this about the church? Right? Get us to question those things. And then it seems like we're doing the right thing. Maybe we're doing something to bring more people in. Is it wrong to have more people in? No, it's not wrong to have more people in the assembly. And so we start rationalizing things. Well, if we compromise on this thing, surely God will overlook this piece because it'll get more people in the doors. And so, again, Satan's crafty that way. He wants us to see things as not so bad, that, it's going to be okay. We deserve this every now and then. And that's what he did with Eve, and that's what Paul is trying to make sure doesn't happen to the church, that they're subtly tempted. You might see the word subtly there in chapter 11. Paul wanted to present the church at Corinth as a what to Christ? A chaste virgin. Okay, well, we refer to the church as the bride of Christ. Right? That's why it's so important for us to not be corrupted, for the church to be what Christ has told us he expects us to be, so that we can be presented as that chaste virgin, as that uncorrupted virgin, as that version of the church that Christ will accept, right? Uncorrupted. How did Paul rank with the other apostles? He talks about his rank here. What's that? Equal, yeah. Yep. He says not a whit behind, right? It's funny, again, we just talked about, hey, don't compare yourself to others. That's what Paul just tells us there in chapter 10. And then he says, I'm not a whit behind. But see, he's not comparing. He's not saying, well, I'm right there. I'm even with the best apostle. He's saying, look, I'm equal in this, right? We should all be acknowledged here. We should all be listened to here. We're all sent by Christ. We're all inspired by Christ to do this. We're equal. We're not a whit behind the chiefest. We're on the same plane here. Paul said, though I be rude in what, yet not in what? Yes, though I be rude in speech. Okay, I didn't write my verse down. Anybody have the verse where that was? 6. But though I be rude in speech. Does anybody have a version that doesn't say rude there? Untrained, okay? Unskilled, what was that? Unskilled. Yeah, so rude, when we think of rude, we think of somebody that's just kind of mean for the sake of being mean, right? He's not saying, I'm just mean when I preach to you. He's saying, you know what, I'm not the best speaker. I'm kind of unskilled in this, right? Now we know that Paul had religious training, right? Gamaliel, he was very skilled in the Jewish religion, right? In the old law, but that doesn't mean his speech was great. And so he's saying, look, I'm a little unskilled. It may sound, maybe it offends your ears a little. Maybe that's where we get rude there from, but not in knowledge, right? But what I'm saying is right. I have the knowledge of these things. I may not be the easiest to listen to, but it's a good sermon. I'm guilty of feeling this way towards preachers at times. Maybe some of y'all are guilty of feeling that way towards me at times, right? Boy, I I just can't stand to listen to him. But what he says is right. I just, oh, if I had, it is a hard preacher to sit through. I've felt that way before. I've sat through sermons and been like, boy, that so monotone, But hey, that's not what our worship, that's not what our study is about. Again, we got to bring those thoughts captive. We got to say, hey, it's not about how great the speaker is. It's about what he's saying. It's about what he's presenting. And it's interesting, a lot of us that might sometimes struggle with preachers that are maybe a little dry or boring at times, it's funny to think, you probably wouldn't enjoy sitting there listening to Paul. And when you think of it that way, I think any one of us, if we had the opportunity to actually hear one of Paul's sermons, we would all jump at that. But then to think, well, you might struggle to stay awake in it. You gotta be engaged in the worship, be engaged in the study, have the right mind, take those thoughts captive, and focus on the material, the Bible material within there. All right. Let's see. Question number 5. In what sense was Paul a robber? Yeah, he took this is another kind of strange verse. He took wages from other churches. If you look at verse 8, I robbed other churches, taking wages of them to do you service. Now, we've studied earlier on in these letters that Paul did not want any money from the Corinthians, right? He didn't want them to pay him to preach. But here we see, but he robbed other churches. Now, he didn't go in and after the collection be like, hey, I'll count the money, and go in there by himself and pocket hat. That's not what he did. He didn't rob churches that way. But it felt like robbing maybe. Any other translations for verse 8 there? I robbed other churches. I don't know. I didn't look. They may all say robbed. And that might be part of why, hey, the message there is, look, he took from them. Now, it wasn't an unwilling, right? They gave to him. But he made sure that he didn't have to take from the Corinthians. Now, this is interesting knowing what we know about Corinth being more wealthy, right? And about his plea just a few chapters earlier, trying to get them to be generous for those churches that were really needing it, showing examples of, hey, in Macedonia, they're giving more than they can give, right? It's interesting there. Sometimes I think we're guilty of it as well at times. The more you have sometimes, the harder it might be to give of what you have. Do you think that's true? Yeah. You see sometimes these people amass just this huge amount of wealth, right? And all they're focused on is increasing that wealth. You ever see or hear instances like that? And so I think the temptation there, and about the whole camel through an eye of a needle, it's not that, a lot of times we think, boy, if I was a billionaire, think of what I could do for the church. Think of what I could really do for the church. And the thing is, and we've talked about it recently, it's not about the amount you give, is it? If you're a billionaire, it might be even more challenging to give, because how much is enough to give, right? And so we think, well, the church at Corinth, this wealthy church, Paul's not taking any money from them. He's having to take from other churches so that he can be supported in helping them, right? But he didn't want money from them because, well, he didn't want them to be able to use that against him. And so I think Paul had some wisdom here in where maybe a lot of the priorities were there in Corinth, that, if I ask for money from these people, they may not listen to me because they love their money, right? Anyways, not all of that is clear there, and some of that is some things that we're just inferring, so don't take that to the bank. But it does appear that could kind of be the way Paul is getting this this message across, right? I've had to take from other churches to be supported because I didn't want to ask from you. All right, let's see. Question number 6. From where did Paul get his support while he was at Corinth? Macedonia, yeah. The church he talked about, I think it was it in 9 maybe? In chapter 9, about how generous they were and about how they just kept giving. That came from Macedonia so that he could help in Corinth. I wonder if this was the first time they really heard that in this letter and how eye-opening that might have been for them. They knew that Paul wouldn't take their money, but I wonder if this is the first time they heard that Paul was actually allowing these poorer areas to support him so he could evangelize to this wealthier area of Corinth. All right, question number 6. From where did, we did that one. Question number 7, we haven't read yet. Somebody want to go ahead and read verses 12 through 15 of chapter 11. All right, so Paul, he says, hey, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing here. And then he starts warning about false teachers. We see a lot of warnings about false teachers. That's what basically our entire Wednesday night study of Jude has been about these dangers of false teachers, about people that creep in, right, and try to teach false things. And we're seeing that here in Corinth as well. It's a big concern, right? The church is growing. For such are false apostles. And so there's people that are claiming to be apostles. There are people that are claiming to be chosen by Christ to go out, and they're out here teaching falsely. Again, we think back to as he closed 1 Corinthians. Remember, he said, hey, you listen to these men. He's kind of giving that plug to, hey, there's some good ones out here you're going to hear from. He's kind of trying to highlight those good ones. But then we get here, and he's continuing to warn. And no marvel, so don't be surprised, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore is no great thing. All right, so Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Again, this goes back to things can seem right. Things can look good. Things can sound good. But if we don't really know our Bibles, study our Bibles, test them with our Bibles, it could be wrong. It could be something directly from Satan, right? That looks good. It looks like something that's profitable, right? We might have somebody come and ask for, hey, I'm doing mission work and I'm going into these countries and these are the things that I'm going to do in these countries. And then they might go and they might teach a false gospel. They might teach that baptism is not essential for salvation, right? So it's important for us to ask those questions. And when possible, to verify those things that we're supporting. We need to make sure we're not supporting false disciples today. So there's this warning of false apostles here. All right, let's look at question number 7. Why is it not surprising that some were transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ? Yeah, Satan himself does the same thing, right? That's a tactic of Satan. That's one of the things he uses is he's going to make things look good. He's gonna try to look like an angel, right? He's gonna try to look like he is good in this, but boy, it's still Satan, right? And he's still got the motives of destruction of our souls, right? And hurting the Lord's church. All right, that was the first bell. We're going to call class a little early because this next portion I want us to read quite a bit, and we'll probably basically only have time for the reading. If you would, before next Sunday, try to read verses 16 through the end of the chapter. And try to grasp, again, this is going to be a lot of warning against these false apostles while still trying to defend the fact that he is not false, that he is a true apostle. So we'll end class a little early today. Thank you all.